Censorship and underreporting has led to mystery surrounding how many people died from the virus in China. Now, officials are silencing Wuhan residents who've lost loved ones. Shortage in corn in China has led to a massive price hike. Many now worried about the repercussions in other areas, as corn makes up more than 60% of fodder. Beijing is under growing scrutiny for its handling of the CCP virus, but experts say the cause of the pandemic is not the only cover-up that needs investigating. The House Minority Leader launching a China task force today. It will take on China-related topics, including influence and the origin of the virus. And a Florida law firm has filed a lawsuit against the Chinese regime for hoarding and stockpiling personal protective equipment. The class action suit brought on by medical workers in the U.S. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. We still don't know how many people died from the virus in Wuhan. The Chinese regime is now silencing residents who've lost loved ones. According to a New York Times report, 7 Wuhan residents reached out to New York-based activist Yang Jianqing, asking for help to sue the regime. One woman said her mother died from the virus after being turned away from several hospitals. Another said her father-in-law died in quarantine. But after several weeks of planning, they suddenly went silent in late April. Yang said 2 of them had been threatened by police. According to Fox News, officials in Wuhan bribed families into silence, paying them around $420 for each relative lost to the virus and offering discounts for cremation and burial services. For many bereaved families, it's not enough. Wuhan resident Zhang Hai is calling for someone to be held accountable. His elderly father died in a Wuhan hospital due to complications from the virus, 3 days before Chinese authorities admitted human-to-human transmission. Mr. Zhang brought his father from another city to Wuhan to be treated for another disease. 1 week later, his father tested positive for the CCP virus. 2 weeks later, he died. For the past 3 months, Mr. Zhang's been raising funds on social media to set up a monument for victims. He's been harassed constantly by authorities. Zhang has noticed authorities are cracking down on discussions about compensation. If more than 5 people decide to take action together, they will be arrested. Another Wuhan resident, Mr. Lu, believes there's little chance families in China will be able to successfully sue the regime.
This is not a society based on rule of law. If you file a lawsuit against the authorities, it's unlikely you'll win. It's almost impossible.
He says anyone who asks the regime to recognize his human rights ends up with all channels blocked. He points out the regime will not give out any compensation because otherwise it would be the same as admitting it was at fault.
The authorities try everything to shift the blame, push away responsibility, and create confusion. It's almost impossible to get compensation. Otherwise, it would be the same as the regime admitting it caused the outbreak itself.
Censorship, a Chinese-Canadian writer, believes pursuing human rights in a setting like that is hopeless. She says the Chinese people will only see justice after the dictatorship falls.
The Chinese Communist Party caused the epidemic, and it used all its efforts to cover up, distort the facts, and destroy the evidence. Now you want the murderer to recognize your human rights? That's impossible.
Now to Wuhan. This video shows one of the biggest shopping malls in Wuhan is almost empty. Most of the business owners have canceled their leases. A month ago, some of them demanded the mall owner to return any rent they had paid in advance so that they could leave. They couldn't afford the cost. Even though Wuhan's lockdown has been lifted since March and authorities have been reporting 0 or very few cases every day since then, the city has not returned to normal. Chinese media has reported the country's auto market has taken a hit. First quarter net profit for its 8 listed auto companies was down more than 80%. That's $2 billion less than last year. The company hit hardest suffered a loss of $94 million. General Motors and Ford sales in China fell sharply by 43% and 35% in the first quarter. The price of corn in China has reached a 5-year high. According to local media, in April, the average price of corn in China was about $300 per ton. That's 10% higher than the same time last year. More than 60% of the fodder in China is from corn, so this could push up the price of many types of food. China can't produce all the grains it needs by itself and needs to import, but due to the pandemic, some countries are tightening their food exports. On top of that, some areas in China have frequently experienced extreme weather this year. All this may worsen the food shortage in China. The United Nations World Food Program says millions of people could be pushed to the brink of starvation due to the global pandemic. And while publicly, China's authorities say there won't be any food shortages, internally they're saying something else. In a leaked document from the end of March, the city of Ningxia instructed officials to do everything possible to secure enough food and other essential supplies. Now to the search for patient zero in other countries. Sweden's epidemiologist says it wouldn't surprise him if the country had virus cases as early as November last year. He told Sweden's TT news agency, "I think you could find individual cases among travelers to Wuhan who were there back in November and December." France has already found cases from as early as December last year. While Chinese state media has used the announcement to prove the virus didn't come from China, the report does not exonerate the country completely. While France's potential patient zero had no direct ties to China, his wife worked at a fish market with colleagues of Chinese origin. That's according to the patient's doctor, who believes the wife could have been asymptomatic. The Department of Homeland Security says the Chinese regime intentionally covered up the virus outbreak to stock up on medical supplies. And a Florida law firm has filed a lawsuit against China's Communist Party for hoarding and stockpiling personal protective equipment. The class action suit is brought on by medical workers in the U.S. NTD's Kevin Hogan has more.
According to a Department of Homeland Security report issued on May 1st, the Chinese regime intentionally concealed the severity of the pandemic from the world. The intel documents state the regime did this to stock up on medical supplies needed to respond to the outbreak. On April 8th, a Florida law firm, the Berman Law Group, filed a class action lawsuit on behalf of U.S. healthcare workers against China's Communist Party
for the hoarding and stockpiling and deliberate use of the PPE products that our doctors, nurses, healthcare workers, first responders in the United States need and are not being given because of China's actions to keep it all for themselves and to profit off of our demise.
The Foreign Sovereign Immunities Act protects foreign states from being sued. But the law group says since the CCP engaged in commercial activity in China that directly affected U.S. citizens, they're not immune.
So now that they commercially stockpiled the PPE, they nationalized U.S. corporations that have factories in China to make PPE 10 and 12-fold. They wouldn't let them export it to the United States until later. When they did that, that commercial activity was to the detriment of the world.
In February, Trump's trade advisor Peter Navarro claimed Beijing effectively nationalized U.S. mask-making company 3M inside China and wouldn't let the company export masks to the U.S. In January, the local Shanghai government took control over the handling and delivery of masks from 3M's facilities in the city. The 3M spokesperson said this impacted the company's ability to fill mask orders the way it normally would. Kevin Hogan, NTD News, New York.
The Chinese Communist Party is under growing scrutiny for its handling of the pandemic. But for some experts, cover-ups under the Chinese regime are nothing new. Our UK correspondent Jane Werrell has the story.
Since December, the Chinese Communist Party has silenced its citizens who have tried to reveal the true nature of the CCP virus. Beijing's handling of the pandemic has put the regime's lack of transparency to the forefront.
I'd say, the CCP's efforts to cover up bad news, to downplay bad news, that happens almost on a daily basis.
Medical ethics group Doctors Against Forced Organ Harvesting released a report this week outlining Beijing's pattern of deception to deny, hide, propagate disinformation, then capitalise on the gains. They say the regime's cover-up of the virus follows this pattern.
History has repeated itself with the cover-up of COVID-19. This is not the first time that we have seen a systematic cover-up of medical tragedies in China.
In 2019, an International People's Tribunal in London, chaired by former UN war crimes prosecutor Sir Geoffrey Nice, unanimously concluded that forced organ harvesting has happened in China on a substantial scale and still continues. They found the main victims were practitioners of Falun Gong, a spiritual discipline suppressed in China. The CCP was invited to give evidence at the tribunal several times but did not respond.
The only response, the only sort of official response, was from the World Health Organization, which doesn't even look at this issue. And they basically came back with a bunch of warmed over Beijing arguments about why this wasn't true.
And there are no signs that forced organ harvesting in China has shut down during the pandemic. Media reports from March show Chinese doctors boasting about a successful double lung transplant. The unusually short wait time indicates that someone was likely killed for those organs. But there is a growing chorus of politicians in the UK wanting a review on UK-China relations. Human rights advocate Benedict Rogers has been calling for a rethink for years.
One of the good things to come from this terrible crisis is a rethinking of policy and of attitudes towards not the Chinese people and the country, but the Chinese Communist Party regime.
He says finding the cause of the virus is not the only thing that needs investigating. Forced organ harvesting also needs to be investigated further. Jane Worrell, NTD News, London.
Amid a tug-of-war between the Secretary of State and Chinese officials, U.S. efforts to get to the bottom of the pandemic's origins are in full swing. State Department spokesperson Morgan Ortagus spoke with the Epoch Times program American Thought Leaders to explain the department's stance.
The Chinese government tries to make this about China versus the U.S. It's not.
That's from State Department spokeswoman Morgan Ortagus. She says the regime needs to understand that it's not about playing the blame game or even about retribution. Instead, she says it's about getting to the bottom of a pandemic that has wreaked havoc on economies and human lives.
We're trying to get to the bottom of it so that way we can make sure that the world never has to deal with a pandemic of this scale ever again.
She added that the U.S. is not the only country calling for an investigation into China's handling of the virus, mentioning Australia, Germany, many in the UK, and even the EU's foreign minister. Echoing the call of Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, Ortagus called for transparency.
Whether it's from a wet market or a lab or somewhere else, another theory that we're not thinking of it, all of this is circumstantial and without certainty until the Chinese Communist Party opens up to the world, allows incredible scientists and doctors to verify data.
She noted the differences between authoritarian and democratic societies when it comes to handling the virus. She says you only get transparency from free and open societies.
And you also see in these authoritarian regimes, not only do we believe that they are underreporting the data of the number of cases, they're also likely grossly underreporting the number of deaths as well.
Talking about the social impact of the virus, Ortagus addressed claims of racism over calling it the Wuhan virus or something similar. She pointed out that China was the first to make that designation, offering a reminder that the regime itself said the virus began in Wuhan months ago. She stated, quote, "It's just a fact."
The House Minority Leader today launching a China task force. He says the House was working on it long before the pandemic. It will take on China-related topics, including influence and the origin of the virus.
On Thursday, House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy launched what he says was supposed to be a bipartisan China task force. The Republican said he couldn't wait any longer for Democrats to cooperate.
We cannot wait any longer. The stakes are too high to sit idly by, which is why today I'm announcing the Republican-led China Task Force. And I invite the Democrats to join with us. There was one moment in time they said yes. A few months ago they said no.
McCarthy said the task force will focus on China-related topics like the regime's influence on the media, universities, and think tanks, as well as the origin of the virus.
Economic threats to our government and our allies, efforts to gain the technologically advantage, and role in the origin and spread of COVID-19.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi did not immediately reply to us for comment. McCarthy said the task force was originally going to be split 50-50 between Democrats and Republicans. The task force will be led by Congressman Mike McCall and joined by 14 other Republican House members. Miguel Moreno, NTD News.
U.S. airlines are looking for more federal assistance. They say flights are at historic lows. There are more cancellations than bookings. And if they don't get a second bailout, they'll face bankruptcy.
The airline industry is looking for more assistance from the government. It comes on the back of the $25 billion it received in March as part of the CARES Act bailout.
The bottom line on all this is a matter of sheer gut survival. These companies have been crippled in a matter of about 7 weeks.
The union leader told Congress yesterday airline carriers are losing up to $400 million per day. Their major costs are fuel and labor. As part of the CARES Act, airlines are required to keep workers paid through September. They also must keep flying current routes. But under lockdown, many of these flights are pretty much empty. Delta's service to Worcester, Massachusetts averaged 1 person per day over the last 22 days.
We're averaging 17 passengers per domestic flight and 29 per international flight. If you've been on a plane, it's eerie.
Airlines can apply for waivers, but are often told to keep flying. At the same meeting, Senator Richard Blumenthal criticized airlines for not giving cash refunds for canceled flights.
You are, forgive me, screwing the very taxpayers whose money is going into your pocket.
The airlines union says there are now more cancellations than bookings, but the carriers are dealing with them lawfully.
On Friday, California is planning its first major step towards normalcy since the pandemic began. In San Francisco, officials are trying their best to make sure residents keep their distance, which can be easier said than done.
This is excellent social distancing. Gold star for you guys today.
6 feet apart is the new normal.
You're like, hey, would you guys mind spacing out a little bit? Please use good practices and just educating people.
And it's officials like Sergeant Maya Fallon, a San Francisco park ranger, working to make sure everyone is following the rules.
Thank you. So spend time outside and do it safely.
Now, a number of states, including California, focusing on phased reopenings. They're hoping to greenlight safe activities and allow some businesses to open their doors, but still asking people to keep their distance.
I think I'll be fine not going to like a bar or a restaurant if need be for a while, but I think just the ability to work somewhere else besides just my room, it will be nice.
Governors are having to balance the health of their residents with kickstarting a much-needed economic recovery. And in addition to that,
it's getting rough.
Dealing with people who simply want to return to normal.
I kind of feel like just let me go out and get it and recover, hopefully. I think people are starting to hit their breaking point.
Gathering at a distance is currently allowed in San Francisco, but park rangers also seeing a few people violating rules set by the city and state, like breaking into tennis courts and scaling fences. And as the stringent rules are slowly loosened, Fallon and other rangers are hoping their work helped buy just enough time to keep the virus at bay.
The Texas governor has removed jail time as one of the consequences for business owners who violate the stay-at-home orders. The change comes as the Texas Supreme Court today freed a beauty salon owner from jail. She was sentenced for defying the governor's lockdown.
Wrote. Business owners across the country can't afford to stay closed any longer and are defying the lockdown. One salon owner in Dallas is free today after she was sentenced to jail for refusing to close her business.
I have to disagree with you, sir, when you say that I'm selfish, because feeding my kids is not selfish. I have hairstylists that are going hungry because they'd rather feed their kids.
She got a citation last month, but stayed open anyway, saying she needed the money. She was sentenced to a week in jail and ordered to pay $3,500. But the state attorney general criticized the decision and ordered her release, writing, "Locking her up is a misguided abuse of power. Release her now so she can return to her family." Her supporters have raised over $500,000 on GoFundMe. And the governor is on her side too, saying in a tweet, "I am eliminating jail for violating an order. Criminals shouldn't be released to prevent COVID-19, just to put business owners in their place." His new executive order makes it impossible for someone to be sentenced to jail for violating his lockdown, applying to any case that came about after April 2nd.
And it's not only in Texas that business owners are moving ahead of governor's orders. In at least 6 other states, business owners are taking risks to reopen. The nation is gaining pace as it reopens. Even some states with extended stay-at-home orders are allowing more businesses to operate. And a small Montana school is one of the first in the nation to open, letting students come back today. NTD's Melina Weiskup has more.
Nearly all schools in the nation are closed for the rest of the school year. But this one in Montana is finishing the year in class. It's one of the first schools to let students back in since the CCP virus shut them down.
The teachers get some closure, the students get closure, we can do some year-end assessments.
With Montana loosening up on in-person gatherings, California cracks down. A federal court judge sides with the governor's order to ban in-person church service. Another lawsuit was denied in the Supreme Court after a group of Pennsylvania business owners asked Justice Samuel Alito to overturn the governor's shutdown order. And in other states, even though many stay-at-home orders are extended to the end of the month, they don't seem to carry much weight anymore. Like in Hawaii, a stay-at-home order that doesn't expire until the end of May. But now shopping malls can reopen, along with others. A similar situation in Connecticut, with a stay-at-home technically in place until May 20th, but allowing many to run their businesses.
Nail salons and haircuts, only by appointment only, very strict. Restaurants, outside only.
Restaurants moving further in Mississippi. Now people can go inside to eat. That makes at least 10 states allowing customers to dine in. But an unhappy customer, barred from dine-in service at a McDonald's in Oklahoma, led to violence, shooting at least 2 employees after being told the dining area was closed. Melina Weiskup, NTD News.
People who have been hospitalized with COVID-19 may be banned from joining the military.
The military are considering a rule preventing those with a history of COVID-19 from joining. The Pentagon is concerned about the virus impacting its ability to safely deploy troops. An official says there's a lack of understanding about the long-term effects of the infection. New cases among sailors on the USS Theodore Roosevelt are still appearing weeks after the virus first appeared on the aircraft carrier. The Navy thinks the rate of asymptomatic cases among crew members may have exceeded 60%. Recruits with a history of the virus will be able to apply for waivers, allowing them to join the service if the policy goes into effect. Many chronic health conditions already require such a waiver.
And in Belgium, hospitality workers laid down kitchen jackets in the formation of a cemetery. The scene draws attention to the troublesome situation of the country's tourism industry, which has been shuttered.
Belgian chefs laid down hundreds of jackets in the center of Brussels to highlight the plight of hotels, restaurants, and cafes that have been shuttered for nearly 2 months. One of the protests organizers said the action was partly to show the scale of the industry, which 10% of Belgians rely on, and that normally earns $19.4 billion a year. Bars and restaurants are ordered to stay closed in Belgium until at least June. Israel has eased many restrictions that were put in place a few weeks ago. Malls and outdoor markets opened on Thursday. Israelis have been confined to their homes or immediate neighborhoods for weeks, but are now allowed to travel within the country. 2 Spanish firefighters have designed a simple and practical disinfection station they provide free of charge to nursing homes in a city in Spain. The portable station is designed to allow healthcare workers to disinfect their personal protective equipment without the help of an additional person. And the death toll in Sweden has surpassed 3,000 today. Sweden took a very soft approach on measures compared to other European countries. Their toll has been higher than that of neighboring countries, but lower than that of Spain, France, and Italy. A chemical gas leak in southern India killed at least 9 people, and emergency services rushed more than 300 to the hospital. Hundreds had to be evacuated from nearby areas. The leak happened at a South Korean-owned battery factory a few days after India relaxed a nationwide lockdown.
Amid the shutdown, German car makers have seen a big drop in sales. They want the government to bring back a cash for clunker scheme. NTD's Germany correspondent Christian Watchen has more on this.
The German car industry is in dire straits and asking the government for help. Amid the pandemic's fallout, the country's most important industry has seen demand plummet. While automakers have reopened factories, about half of its workforce is still furloughed. In April, both production and export shrank by over 90% compared to last year. The industry wants to have a cash for clunkers scheme to boost demand, which was already used during the 2007 to 2009 recession. Such a scheme gives taxpayer-financed discounts to consumers who trade in old vehicles for new ones. This week, Chancellor Angela Merkel's government met with car makers. The CEOs of VW and others argue the auto industry is paramount for Germany's economy to recover.
Car dealers in Germany reopened 2 weeks ago as part of the first phase of easing the lockdown measures, but they've made few sales since then. Car sales dropped by over 60% in April.
There are many critics of such a scheme, including within the government. They say they would only agree to stimulus measures that will lead to more electric vehicles on the road.
So a scrappage bonus like the one we had in 2008. There can't be anything like that again one-to-one. I'm firmly convinced of that. It must be a targeted program that really helps to bring about a new start in the automotive industry.
The government said it will make a decision by early June. Reporting by Christian Watson, NTD News, Berlin.
In our business roundup, new jobless claims dip. Luxury retailer Neiman Marcus files for bankruptcy, and Lowe's promises to deliver $1 million worth of flowers to senior homes for Mother's Day.
Over 3 million people claimed for unemployment benefits last week, but the rate seems to be slowing. It's around 700,000 less than the week before. It brings the total during the past 7 weeks to over 33 million, a record figure. The 133-year-old luxury retailer Neiman Marcus filed for bankruptcy on Thursday. It's one of the highest profile collapses yet among retailers. It furloughed much of its 14,000 workers in March. Retailer J. Crew also filed for bankruptcy on Monday. Lowe's will deliver $1 million worth of flowers to senior homes this Mother's Day. The flowers are from small business growers that may have experienced slow business amid the outbreak. Uber will help deliver the flowers to more than 500 long-term care and senior living facilities. The Bank of England said Britain could be headed for its biggest economic slump in over 300 years. The economy may shrink by 25% between March and June, with unemployment doubling to 9% of the workforce.
The race to find effective virus treatments has led to an unlikely hero, a 4-year-old Belgian llama named Winter. His blood could hold a weapon to blunt the virus.
A llama called Winter could be key to finding a cure to the new coronavirus. The llama in Belgium is at the heart of studies by US and Belgian scientists who say they have found a tiny particle that appears to block the virus. Llamas and other members of the camel family are distinct in creating smaller antibodies called nanobodies, with which scientists can more easily work. The virus has a crown shape with protein spikes onto which any antibody can latch. The team is made up of researchers from the University of Texas at Austin and Belgium's VIB Research Institute. They aim to begin animal tests and roll out human trials by the end of the year.
Here at China in Focus, we dedicate ourselves to bringing you truthful, unbiased reporting. Don't forget to subscribe for the latest updates, and see you tomorrow.